Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild supplement Treasures of the Underdark 40 Magic Items, designed by Matt Vaughan, aka Dungeon Rollers for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to Platinum patrons, Andrew, Brian, Richard, and Joe. And Gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcos, David, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, aka Cert2B, Adam, and Dead Lizard Lounge. Thank you all very much for your support. Magic items are always fun compendiums to look through. Loot is great. 5e is a lot less loot-centric than other editions of D&D, but loot is still a big factor of the game. I appreciate that Treasures of the Underdark, as evidenced by the title, is thematically themed. That's a terrible phrase. Thematically themed. It is themed appropriately to the Underdark. So, obviously, campaigns of the Underdark, you've got Out of the Abyss, as well as just any kind of dungeon, or frankly, any enemy that could be associated with the Underdark. So, you've got your Drow, your Dwerger, your Darrow, spiders and beholders, oh my, or, you know, just really they could be found anywhere. I mean, you could have any kind of enemy could have plundered the Underdark and taken this item out of the Underdark and been used anywhere. So technically doesn't have to be tied to the Underdark, but that's what you're getting with this supplement. It's very, very well organized. It's laid out pretty much exactly like you would see an official material from Wizards of the Coast in terms of how the tables are drawn, the font. It's got standard artwork from the DM's Guild creator resource, which is fine. Otherwise, it's pretty much just what it says on the tin. You've got your 40 items. They are separated. You can see there are some tables for uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary. It's a little bit leaning towards the more powerful items, and this is a tendency for a lot of creators, is you want to make the really cool, fun shit, and I get it. I totally get it. It's fun to make really powerful, cool magic items. I just don't know how often those are actually going to get see play, because a lot of these, you know, legendary and very rare items, you're only going to maybe give just a handful of those for an entire campaign or an entire character's career, whereas the more uncommon and rare items you would give out a lot more often and without necessarily breaking the balance of your game too much. And in this case, it's a lot of more magical versions of mundane items, which I think is cool. You know, you've got your usual, your rings, your amulets, your swords, you know, weapons and armor. But what makes the more mundane ones interesting is there's like a magic rope, or magical mushroom rations, or there's a magical boat. Those kind of things, you know, that aren't used in combat at all, but are used for just the world travel, or, you know, solving puzzles and that kind of thing. I think those are often overlooked as magic items, and I really appreciate there are a number included in here. So a really nice variety, even though a lot of them are skewed a little bit towards higher level play, which makes them more fun and interesting magic items. You just probably wouldn't end up using them quite as many. You can see here in chapter, I guess it's chapter 2, is all these little tables at the beginning. It also is divided up between different creatures as well as the factions of the Underdark. And specifically, this one looks at 3 major, I guess, civilizations of the Underdark, which is the Drow, the Dwerger, and the Darrow. Now, I would argue that the Deep Gnomes would be, I can't pronounce that, it's the Svifferniblin. Would have been another good faction to explore. But these are the 3 that we're given, and then we're given a lot of just kind of generic creatures of the Underdark theme. So it's a lot of spider shit. There's Myconid Spore. Eyes of the Beholder is a really cool item. And I'm going to go through just a couple of my, I think, the more interesting items that are here. If I look at my notes, which ones I wrote down that I enjoyed. So, for example, one of these items is a tattoo, which is the Blessings of the Prince. So, a big theme of the Underdark. Obviously, you are a bit closer to the Abyss at that point. Although, I guess it's on a different plane of existence. But, you know, you get the feeling of you go down and hell is closer to you. And, obviously, Out of the Abyss, the campaign is to do with demons. It's demons reappearing in the world. So you've got your whole Underdark mess to deal with, which is just a dangerous place in general, and then also there are demons being summoned and invading the Underdark. So since this one is designed for Out of the Abyss, although as I mentioned in the beginning, you don't necessarily have to use it for the Out of the Abyss campaign only, but a lot of this stuff is demon themed, or devils, I guess. So the Blessings of the Prince is a tattoo of the Demogorgon that you ritually mark onto your forehead, which gives you Devil's Sight, which is extremely powerful. Basically, you have like true sight. I don't think it says for how far that is. And then, but in Bright Light, you suffer from disadvantage on perception checks and have vulnerability to radiant damage. But the more interesting thing is here, so mechanically it's got a give and take, is that you have a tattoo of a major fucking demon on your forehead, and that has really interesting role-playing repercussions, because obviously evil characters and demonic cultists will give you a thumbs up, be like, hey buddy, what's up? And everybody else will be like, what the fuck is up with this? It reminds me of an early quest in Fallout 2 where you can choose to basically be tattooed for the Slavers organization in order to bypass a quest early in that game. And it seems like a good idea at the time, because then you don't have to pay the money and you can just join their guild. But as you discover, as you go in the game, everybody fucking hates you because you basically tattooed the fact that you're a part of the Slavers Guild and you just hunt people down, which you can totally do in that game. And this reminds me of that. So that's a really neat... I love it when magical items add different role-playing mechanics. On the flip side of that, there's one legendary item that I really raised an eyebrow on. I think it's actually the last item on here. The Word of Grazda, which is another demon-themed item. This one has to do with like hedonism and gluttony and like self-excess and all that. The problem I have here, and it's a powerful item, and you have to agree to basically swear fealty to Grazd to attune to it. But every day you suffer from a new madness, which that part is interesting, but the madnesses sound like jarringly bad to bestow on any player. Admiring your own reflection, that's great. I think that can be a fun tool to roleplay. The very next madness one from 21 to 40 is that sex is a great solution to all of life's problems. Why doesn't anyone else get this? So does that mean the person is just super horny that day and wants to fuck everything in sight? That seems like a really, really bad, dangerous, horrible thing to do to any player that they don't have any real control over, and they have this weird compunction. So, and there's another one that's to properly honor my dark, beautiful lord, I must prepare intricate, debauched rituals. That's also a little bit leery. So I have some kind of, like, I get that it's tied to the theme, but that seems a little too much to force on a player, especially if they might not know the full gamut of accepting fealty to this certain demon lord. Might come with some really, really nasty repercussions. So these kind of big major items, these legendary items which can define a character, I always find very, very interesting, and it could be a lot of fun to do that to a character, and that kind of becomes their ongoing story as this item that you've given them. But that one looks like a little too much. I don't want to force a character to be horny all the time. Otherwise, it's got some really, really nicely thematic items. Obviously, things that have to do with specifically Underdark creatures, like a doppelganger charm that lets you polymorph yourself into humanoids. Things that let you control the earth. There's Dwerger armor that gives you like Dwerger abilities. So, for example, casting the Enlarge spell on yourself for invisibility. Collar of the Drow, which lets you transform your appearance into, I believe, that of a drow. A lot of these are designed to help you in the in the Underdark, and specifically with Out of the Abyss. I really love the Eyes of the Beholder item because I think that is very thematically tied to a beholder, in that it has all these different gems that can also it's an amulet with different gems, and each amulet has a different power, like a beholder with its different eye stalks, which I think is really, really neat. And the fact that you can actually go to a jeweler, or if you are proficient with a jeweler's kit, and attempt to repair part of it, because it mentions as part of the item, when you discover it, that 1d4 random gems are missing. So you can actually either repair it yourself or have somebody else repair it and try to add more abilities. And I really like magic items that give players options in that way. So in this case, you've got different options on like what do you want to cast, and can you actually repair it to even cast more things. Another example of this is the Deathblade, which is actually right here, which is a legendary dagger. I believe it is a sentient dagger, like the that staff. A chaotic evil dagger, of course, but it lets the wielder pump different kinds of poison into the blade, which is very, very nifty. You can spend a minute to extract a poison from the below list. Seeps out through small pockets in the blade, coating it in a metallic ichor, which is really, really neat. So the player, again, this is giving the player choices on how to use their item, and I like those magic items a lot. It gives players a lot more fun options, hopefully without bogging things down and slowing things down too much as they look like, oh man, what poison would be the best thing to do in this situation? Do I want to give them a sluggishness poison or a blinding poison or a poisons to do raw damage? I think that's a really, really neat thing to where I'm thinking that would be a great item to add to my campaign, although obviously I would not make it this big, powerful, legendary sentient dagger. I would just make it kind of a more, less game-changing dagger, maybe just give it a +1, lower the DC on things, but still have that concept of multiple poisons in a dagger that they can choose to coat with it, which I think that is just really, really interesting and neat. What else did I like? The Fungal Rations here. Again, I like items that are feel like they are wholly original and interesting and have multiple effects. And in this case, you can find a box full of 3d6 mushrooms. Each one gives you the effect of a good berry, which essentially fills you up for that day. Now, I don't play with rations as a mechanic in our campaigns, so that part doesn't really interest me. So I'd probably change it to a maybe some kind of heal or something, or benefit of a short rest. But what it does is you can roll a d10 each time you consume one, and it has some kind of extra side effect. One of them, if you roll a 1 or 2, you become violently ill, take poison damage, and suffer exhaustion. That's awful. And what's funny is the players wouldn't really know what happens until they experiment by eating these mushrooms, so they would start to realize like these have different effects. One of them, they feel refreshed and revitalized. Gain a +5 to initiative rolls, which is huge. Advantage on acrobatics and athletics until the next long rest. You gain purple skin and get a +1 AC, but disadvantage on charisma checks. You gain temporary hit points, or you can have enhanced senses. So most of them are very good. You just have a slight chance of it being bad. I think that's really, really neat. The fact that it's a finite amount, the fact that they have to eat the mushrooms before they determine what they actually do, I think is a really, really fun concept that, obviously it doesn't have to be tied to mushrooms. It can be any kind of ration you want to use in your campaign, but I like that idea quite a lot. My only real complaint is that reading through a lot of these, it feels like a lot of them are themed versions of items that you would find in the Dungeon Masters Guild, and that is a very nitpicky comment because there are a lot of items in the Dungeon Masters Guide. Like that covers a large chunk of magical items. You could honestly just roll with the Dungeon Master's Guide, all the magical items included in there for any campaign and be perfectly fine. These just take a lot of those items and theme them towards Underdark use, which is great, and I think that's kind of what the point of it was, but I have looked at other magic item supplements, and I feel like they've maybe done a little bit of a better job with just wholly more unique and interesting items rather than this one, which is taking a lot of... It feels like it just plays it safe when it comes to magic items. Like a lot of these are like I'm nodding along like, okay, well there's that item in terms of how to use different special thematically appropriate Underdark creatures and theming them onto items that you would normally already find. So not a whole lot of big surprises, I guess, is what I'm going for, other than like that tattoo or the way it uses some of the more mundane items like a magical raft that always essentially magnetizes you to the bottom so you can go over waterfalls real easy. Or there's like a candle that only you can see, but it still lights your way, but other enemies can't see it, which sounds really boring, but like immediately when you play, you're like, oh shit, that's actually really useful, especially in the Underdark, because now we can see, but we're not giving off a fucking beacon of light to every enemy around us. So things like that I really like seeing, and those felt more original and interesting rather than the items that just are slightly rethemed, like the Dwerger armor, which is just magical armor that has some Dwerger effects and those kind of things. So for the most part, I think this is a really great supplement. It uses that theme of the Underdark very, very well. It also includes a nice little final chapter here, chapter 4, which I don't know if you can call it a chapter if it's just a single page, but fine. And essentially a way to create your own magic items, and you can tell this is kind of probably the way that the designer looked at making their own magic items for this compendium, which is looking at what traits certain races and creatures have in the Underdark, and then applying those to magical items, and that is very effective, I think. I mean, spiders are probably the easiest one. Poison immunity, casting web once per day, gaining a climbing speed. Those are all very easy things to theme after spiders. Some of them are a little more interesting. The let's see, the Darrow, they're the insane ones. Insanity, you can gain advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. I suppose that makes sense. There's also some nice curses. I would have liked to see more curses in the Underdark items. I feel like there's a lot of like evil sentient items, which are obviously they have their own form of built-in curse. But I would have liked to see a few more items that are powerful but cursed, so you could give them to weaker, lower level creatures. So there's a nice little table here. But overall, I think it's a very, very solid compendium. My only complaint is very nitpicky, but it's very well organized. Has a lot of good items for Underdark themed adventures and dungeons. Let's go over my quick pros and cons for Treasures of the Underdark. So pro, all 40 magic items are richly themed to the Underdark and its denizens. Does what it says on the tin, basically. You get your, and not necessarily just for Out of the Abyss either. I do think there's value in any kind of just dungeon that might feature, spiders or drow or a beholder dungeon or something. Certainly they could be done there. Or, again, you could just find them anywhere. Somebody plundered this item from the Underdark. I think that's certainly acceptable. But for Out of the Abyss, obviously, this almost like a must-buy because it's very nicely to have those themed items. Pro, there's a nice variety of different kinds of magical items. You got your usual swords, amulets, rings, and potions, but you also have more interesting magical ropes, which I didn't even go over those. There's one that just lets you stand the rope up, that kind of thing. There's a silk rope made out of spider thread that you can store in your pocket. That could be useful. Those mushroom rations that I really like, the fungal rations, and that the tattoo, the magical tattoo that bestows some magical abilities, but also brands you as a fucking demon cultist. So I think those are the most interesting items to me. And pro, a single-page chapter full of tables to make your own Underdark-themed magical items. Very nice to have. My only con, again, very nitpicky, is that many of the items feel like rethemed versions of existing items in the Dungeon Masters Guild, rather than necessarily wholly original creations. Not that there aren't any there certainly are, but I have looked at other supplements that do that job a little bit better here. Final verdict, Treasures of the Underdark includes dozens of thematically appropriate loot when dealing with drow, spiders, beholders, and other denizens of the Underdark. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work through DM's Guild affiliate links and through patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.